This is Crosscultural. I'm here today with Rene Friesen, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his experiences here in the Campos Menonitas of Chihuahua. So welcome and thanks for participating.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, so just to start out, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Rene Friesen. I'm 37, I think. I'm married. I have a wonderful wife and 2 wonderful children. I was born here in Mexico. Currently, I'm in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you were born here in the Campos. What was daily life for you and your family like growing up?
I would say it's probably a lot different than for many of the local Mennonites.
Mm-hmm.
My dad traveled a lot. And so I actually lived in 5 different states in the U.S. I lived in Canada. I lived in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
This is all this is all before I hit 12, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of traveling.
Mm-hmm.
School was never very a high priority, although I did get some education in Texas, in Seminole, Texas, of all places.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So very thankful for that, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a major influence for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but so that was the traveling part. Then we moved back down to Mexico when I was 12, and essentially we've been living down here, working over here ever since. I did take 2 years to go back to the U.S. to study. Came back, college dropout, and started to work.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
And that traveling as a child before the age of 12, was that seasonal agricultural work, or what was the context of that?
So I actually don't come from a agricultural heritage, right?
Yeah.
So if you go back, and by the way, I didn't know this until maybe a year ago, right? But I'm sure you're familiar with these very big Mennonite history family books, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Okay, perfect. So all of a sudden I find out that not my grandpa, I don't know if this is the correct terminology, but my great grandpa, Henry Friesen, from that guy on, so we've always been manufacturers of some sort, or blacksmiths, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I can't make grass grow as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
And so we were always into manufacturing. We were always into doing something of that nature. We've also always been into business of some nature. I find out that just looking through those books right now, that some of the other major manufacturing operations like Meridian come from my great-grandpas, right?
Yeah.
So and I had no idea. I've never contacted them or pursued that. It was just interesting to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, so for us growing up, it was never out on the field. It was never go and, get in the tractor.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned to drive a tractor, but we were, going to buy sodas and chips, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
For sure, right? But as far as my dad moving around a lot, that was mainly because he was not a farmer. And at that time, he wasn't sure, I guess, what exactly to pursue in his life. So we did a lot of odds and ends.
Yeah.
And I guess at the end he settled for what my grandpa, his dad, was doing at that time, and that was a little bit of manufacturing and buying and selling industrial equipment.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've always been in the industrial part of it, never in the ag part of it.
Yeah, and so how would you say that those experiences traveling, and you mentioned those educational experiences in Seminole, Texas, how they impacted how life went coming back to the Campos?
Yeah, so first of all, I think if you travel that much and you grow up traveling that much, I'm not sure if I'm going to use the term right here, but I feel like a gypsy sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I feel very blessed to have been able to travel that much.
Yeah.
I know that's not for everybody.
Yeah.
My wife, she did not travel a whole lot, and so I can't sit still in one place for too long. I need to be on a business trip. I mean, even if it's got to be a made-up one, right?
Yeah.
After 2 months, I got to go somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
But that's just in me. And looking back, I think it's because it was so ingrained in us, right?
Yeah.
From such a young age. So that's I think a positive. At the same time, I have children now. I want to show them some stability.
Yeah.
It won't be the conventional stability that most Mennonites here are used to, right?
Yeah.
So you got to kind of take that into consideration. But overall, just it changes your view on life. You don't even make decisions the same way anymore, right? Because around here, what's the decision-making process? Well, I'm going to grow to a certain age. I'm going to get baptized. Then I can get married. And then I'm going to continue the farming operation. And I'm by no means criticizing that. I'm just saying that way of thinking is very foreign to me because of where I come from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I've definitely been maybe a bit of an outsider within the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
To a large degree.
Yeah.
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 Also, I would be careful in terms of interracial marriages, if you want to call it that, because I know that that's part of maybe the questioning.
Yeah, for sure.
But not based on skin color, purely based on a belief system.
Yeah.
Right. I have plenty of friends that have married or into different races, and the challenge is not the skin color.
Yeah.
The challenge is the way you think.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so the way you think is how you've been brought up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so hence again, that's, I think, how did it change me? How did it impact me? What has changed? Well, I'm just not really your average Mennonite.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I don't think like the average Mennonite.
Yeah.
Right. So that brings challenges, difficulties, acclimating, understanding, maybe even bonding to a certain degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also brings a lot of positives, a lot of strengths. You view things, what someone might view as a problem, you see as a really good opportunity, right? And so on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you came back to the campus at the age of 12, what kind of interactions between Mennonites and people outside the community were common?
What kind of interactions? Very, very few, actually. I mean, you would have the normal. You might go to a restaurant in town on the weekend. Although eating out back then versus what it is today is two planets, right? It's different. But there weren't a lot of interactions, and it wasn't that you were told not to interact with the outside world. Yeah. But you were definitely told to be careful. Yeah. You were definitely told to not to trust very, very, very lightly. Yeah. So that was definitely always a major issue. Make sure that you don't get duped. Make sure that you don't, get robbed or etc. So our interaction was at a minimal. Right, so we worked within the community. We interacted within the community, and we didn't really interact with someone outside the community. Now, my dad was always the kind of a guy that was making friends elsewhere. Yeah, for sure. And so we often had strangers over, right? That and I always noticed they were great people, right? I obviously couldn't see into their heart or into their mind, but in terms of how they treated us, treated us well better than our neighbors. Yeah. Right.
And so, would you say that in that respect, that your family was atypical in that way?
Very much so.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, what are some of the first cross-cultural interactions that you can remember from growing up?
Some of the very first ones.
Yeah. Or anything that's particularly memorable or sticks out in your mind.
Sure. Well, I hope this won't incriminate me, but I do remember one of the very first interactions was when I was snuck across the border. Oh. So that was I was maybe 3-4 years old, but I remember it very vividly.
For sure.
Absolutely, and it was definitely not by midnight. So it's called right.
Yeah.
I didn't have papers at that time. I was an undocumented person, and so on.
Yeah.
So, but then again, if you look at that was the person. That was the type of person that helped us.
Yeah.
It wasn't someone local. It wasn't
Yeah.
a neighbor. It wasn't someone that we were familiar with.
Yeah.
In those terms, it was as far as I was concerned, it was a complete stranger. Now my dad knew the gentleman and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those would be some of the very first memories that I have. Beyond that, just doing business, right? Just buying and selling, dealing with the people, and of course, when you deal with people in Mexico, you very quickly become a friend of the family.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So you're invited to meet the family. You're invited to stay at the house. You're invited to share meals.
Yeah.
And so as far as that's concerned, it's a very warm welcome.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your business and how you developed your skills and interests in this area.
Yeah. Okay. So we are a manufacturing company. Essentially, we manufacture shipping containers for the automotive industry. How did we come about that? So my grandpa back in the day said, "Rene, whatever you do not go into manufacturing." No, he wasn't manufacturing. He had no schooling. He had, I think, one year of DARP school, maybe 1 year, maybe. And but still, some of the industrial equipment that he not only designed, engineered, and built is still in use today.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right, so 40, 50 years later, it's still producing.
Yeah.
So he said to me, "Rene, do not go into manufacturing." And he told me that, and he told my dad that. And I remember that. And I said, "Well, why not?" Well, the thing is, Rene, you can make way more money and have a way better lifestyle if you stick to buying and selling. Plus, you get to travel. You get to meet new people.
Yeah.
And it's just such a hassle-free life compared to dealing with a manufacturing facility, a lot of people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. So I pondered that for a while, and when the time came to make a decision, I was like, I really want to get into manufacturing.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Boy. So one day I pursued that dream, step by step, and it was a 7-year process, and then one day you see what you see here, right then.
Yeah.
But it's, like I say, it's been in our blood. It's been in our way of thinking, in our way of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know that. I thought it was quite unique until I read enough about myself that I was like, I guess I'm just like my family.
You just got that homing device for manufacturing somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we started manufacturing here in Mexico. We had some foreign investment from Canada, actually, and as time went on, we grew, and right now we continue to grow.
Yeah.
Right. So
absolutely.
Right now I'm so deep in manufacturing, I'm not sure I can go back to buying and selling. It looks very attractive though on many days. It does.
Yeah, for sure.
But so my dad and my brothers are still in the buying and selling business, which is, I think it's a beautiful business. I grew up in that business.
Yeah.
I helped my dad in that business for many years.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely look back now and say, yeah, I think my grandpa was right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what languages do you typically use to do business? And what challenges and opportunities come as a result of doing business in multiple languages? So
mainly the languages would be English and Spanish.
Yeah.
Obviously, I prefer English. Not that I'm an expert in it, but that was one of my first languages that I really learned to read in, to be able to comprehend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Spanish is definitely a challenge for me in terms of conversational Spanish. I'm much more of a technical business Spanish type person,
sure. Yeah,
because that's what I do every day.
Yeah.
I rarely have drawn out conversations in Spanish regarding something that isn't work related.
For sure.
German, like in terms of German, not Plotich, but German. So I probably have like a grade 3, grade 4 German. So when my kids were born, my wife and I decided that the only language we would speak in the house would be German, first and foremost. That would be the first language that they would learn.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's the hardest of the the four that we speak. And so we did that. But by the time the kids reached ages 5 and 6 and 7, English became so natural. TV, cartoons, magazines, books, etc.
Yeah.
Plus traveling to the U.S. a lot, right? I'm taking them with, and they pick it up.
Yeah.
So they have an excellent German, by the way. And right now they always laugh at me. So I try not to speak it. But some of our customers, like Volkswagen, Audi, BMW, they are from Germany.
Absolutely.
So when they come here, it's a huge advantage, right? Because they look at you and they're like, "Oh, you speak our language. Wow. Well, we like you already."
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have something in common that's very sacred, almost, right? Because
absolutely.
It's how you communicate.
Yeah.
And so that's been a great help. It's been a great opportunity. It's been a great strength. The challenge is that I think, especially for a guy like me, you don't really learn one language very well, right? And you tend to speak in 3 languages in one sentence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that annoys a lot of people. But it's just that if you're so wrapped in it, up in it, and you actually use those languages, and you're in an environment where everyone understands the 3 languages, you're picking the word that best describes what you're trying to transmit at that time in the language that you can find it in your vocabulary.
And that's, in a lot of ways, how everybody else is communicating as well, like within those languages. And so, within this environment, like, oh, this is very normal. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the drawbacks of that is, unfortunately, if you're ever trying to express yourself, some feeling and emotion, to someone that only speaks one language, you're going to struggle for words a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you're also on the radio quite a bit. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you became involved with radio.
So I used to be on the radio more than I am lately. Work is consuming me right now, but I got into the radio mainly because of programs or because of other works that I was related to. So I own a couple of companies, and one of them happened to be providing services to the farmers. Since I can't farm, I might as well do something else. Right? So that often required to make very broad announcements, or to broadcast an announcement into the community, because I had 300-400 customers that were farmers, and I was doing a project for them, and so I needed to find a medium that everyone was connected to. I could say it once and not be on 400 phone calls.
Yeah, exactly.
Radio was the optimal thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was one thing. The other thing is, I used to be involved somewhat in politics here in Mexico. Yeah. And so obviously being a Mennonite and then being involved in politics, which is kind of frowned upon.
Yeah, well, for sure.
So not kind of, it's frowned upon.
Yeah.
It's frowned upon. So that was, so I just felt someone needed to say something. Yeah. And for better or for worse, I did.
Yeah.
I have never regretted that part of it.
Yeah.
I don't like politics, even though I was in it. I don't like the environment that it has become.
For sure.
Okay. So that's been one thing. And then just in general, I've organized some conferences, some events, brought down some speakers. And again, the best way to really get that out is to be interviewed on the radio and talk about it.
Yeah.
All right. And so I guess that's what's kind of led me down that path. I mean, if we lived in an area where radio was here and podcasts were here, I'd probably be on some podcast doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right, but it's more because of it's what's accepted here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so during that time when you were on the radio more, the format was, did you have like a time weekly that you were on the radio, or just like special times that correlated with special events, or what did that look like specifically?
The latter. Definitely the latter. So basically for events, for certain things, and then we would usually do it in a interview type setup, right? So that we could talk about it more casually. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And was that related at all with Bram Siemens' station, or was
absolutely?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it was. It was actually only on his station, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly.
Yeah.
It was only on his station.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. You've also done quite a bit of public speaking in Spanish. Talk about how you got started with that and some of the events and organizations that you have partnered with.
Yeah, so I got started with that just simply because I am a great believer in the people of Mexico, right? I look at our country, and I say our country because I was born here, so I can't deny my birth country.
Yeah.
At least I think I shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so I look at the country. We have a population of about 120 million people. We have lots of trees, which translates into wood, into lumber, into paper. We have lots of rivers, freshwater rivers. We have 2 major oceans on each side. We're the neighbor to the biggest consumer nation in the world. We have gold mines, silver mines, copper mines, steel mines, plutonium mines, etc. We have lots of oil, lots of natural gas. We have jungle ecosystems, desert. We have wonderful, very fertile, producing agricultural land. We have mountaintops. We have wonderful, beautiful beaches, some of the best in the world. And yet, you go visit a small country like Dubai, which is probably the state of Chihuahua, that has 4.5 million people. And all of a sudden, you live in you become enveloped by all of the luxury and by all of the organization or the orderly conduct of the people and of the highway systems, the infrastructure, and the way business is done.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you're depressed because we have way more than that country does, and yet we live. Like half of our population lives in poverty.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
totally unacceptable.
Yeah,
and so, I mean, I'm one person, right? But I believe that the only way that we can ever truly get out of where we're from or where we're under is by first changing the way we think, right? And so, if we transform our minds, then we have at least a shot at doing something else. I mean, I remember living in Texas and on Saturdays and Sundays going through the trash dumpsters. I mean, that was our thing, right? And that's where we got our toys from. That's where we often got clothes from because we found clothes in there. That's where we got whatever from. And I don't regret that. And I don't even look down upon that, right? Like, I think it was a great formative stage of my life. So I look at the Mexican people and I say, well, if poverty starts in the mind and what we need is to first be transformed in our mind, then someone at least needs to talk about it. And so along those lines, I started talking about it and I started doing some speeches and some conferences and so on. But that's been my goal. It's still my goal. It's still something that we partake in. Some of the organizations that we've connected with have been there's a church in Chihuahua that we've connected with. There's also an organization out of Paraguay called Jesús Responde al Mundo, so Jesus responds to the world. And so they now have a division in Mexico. I sit on the board, and so through there we also do some speaking events for more the business community, if you will. So that's kind of what we've done. We formed our own organization here as well. It's called Éxito Total, which means total success. So we call it total success because success is not economical success. It's a facet of being successful. And successful does not mean being a millionaire. It means having enough for yourself and a little bit more to help or share with somebody else. And so that's what we basically do in terms of speaking and going out and helping, right? I think we need to do a lot more of it, but I guess it's all about priorities at the end of the day. So.
And so that organization will partner with churches and then other community organizations to, with the speaking and then.
Yeah, so basically what we'll do is we'll offer, especially the churches, we'll offer to do an event or host an event for free.
Yeah.
And then we'll come in and we'll do the whole thing.
Yeah.
We'll do the speaking, the teaching, the training, and the Q&A sessions, and just helping the people walk through that step by step. That's more when we work with a church or with an event. Those have been mainly in Spanish. That's my target market. I'm not saying that we haven't done that in German and in English. We have.
For sure.
But definitely my target market is the Spanish-speaking world. And so that's what we've done there. And in terms of material, I mean, I always want to refer first to the Bible. And if any business guy asks me, well, what part, like, what do you want me to read? Right? Well, read Proverbs.
Yeah.
Like start with Proverbs. It's got 31 chapters. Read one chapter a day for every day of the month. And any month that doesn't have 31 days, we'll read all 3 chapters or 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. But in the middle of all this, I got to know a gentleman by the name of Peter J. Daniels. He's a speaker, businessman from Australia. And so I was able to go and meet him and so on and so on. And so I've negotiated the distribution rights for all of his books and all of his material for Spanish. Right? So we've got that translated just recently. We have to make some more corrections, but phase 1 is done.
Yeah.
And so we definitely promote a lot of his material.
Yeah.
His books, they're not really big books. They're very thin, to the point.
Yeah, for sure.
There's really no fluff in it. They're more like manuals, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's like personal self-help books. It's goal setting. It's way of thinking. It's values. It's codes of conduct, etc.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of where we're geared to, because again, we think that most people don't do what they say; they do what they think.
Yeah.
So if we can influence the way you think about something by what you read and by what you hear and by what you see, then we have a shot at actually turning some of these things around.
And so I was hearing part of one of these events that you did at, I believe, Palabra Viva Church.
Yes.
And it was interesting because you were incorporating a lot of kind of like personal storytelling into the speaking. I guess, what is the overall kind of like goal and motivation, like in working those like personal experiences into these events?
You know, if you can transmit a message via a story, it'll be 10 times more powerful than if you give them a step-by-step formula.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that you learn is don't say you don't, but I found it very ineffective to go up on stage and say, I've accomplished this, I've accomplished that, I've accomplished this, right? Well, good for you, right? It's basically what it comes down to, right?
Sure.
So I'd much rather go up on stage, make myself vulnerable, and say, look, these are the things that I feel. As a matter of fact, we actually launched a conference based on failure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, of course, there was a lot of, I mean, even the church that we did that with, they had a lot of questions about that, right?
Sure.
Because, because the conference was called something like, Entrepreneurs for the King, all right? Presented by the number 1 failure.
Oh,
right?
Okay,
Right? And so the whole conference, I spoke about failure, what we learned from it, and why that actually pushes us forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, and so that's why I incorporate the personal stories, because it makes it more real, if you will.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
It makes it a bit more believable, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just, well, I think that one guy once said, that you should do this.
Yeah,
well, that's
exactly.
great, right? But I'm not sure if it works till today.
And so kind of partnering those two things together about the learning and moving from failure and the éxito all together in one. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so you're also involved with Levenswasser Church.
I am.
And they are, is that not correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
So just to clarify. That's where we call our home church. Right?
Yeah.
But I have no activities in the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except if I'm asked to speak or of that nature.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I was going to ask about the role of any type of translation or anything, but through the speaking.
Through the speaking is where I would be involved in, right? But in that,
absolutely.
That's as far as it would go.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. So what are some cross-cultural connections that you and your family have made recently that have impacted you?
Just becoming really close friends with people outside of the community, like, it really impacts your family and your kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that's something that we've done on purpose, and it's something that we continue to try and strategically plan, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. My daughter is 14. My son is 11, and I am very well aware by now that that we are pretty much past the major formative years of their life. Sure. Right. And I also realize that as they come into the teenage years or are in the teenage years, that they will look for outside influences in terms of authority and advice and etc. So I really want to do my part to make sure that they are involved or have connections to people that have done great things, right? And that have a moral boundary, a moral or a code of ethic, right? That they can go to. That's not just me.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So that we continue to do, and that has also impacted our life as far as my wife and myself. We have found that some of those people can become really great friends. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And you didn't expect that. Yeah. Right. So that's really good.
So for a lot of people, life in the campus has changed dramatically in a relatively short amount of time. What do you think has spurred those changes? And in what ways is life different for your generation than your parents' and grandparents' generation?
I think the biggest change is what you might call a 40-year overnight success. Okay. Yeah. So you've had, since 1920s, you've had Mennonites come down here and start to work hard and work very hard and be very consistent, be constant, be value driven. Be even call it man-made principle driven, if you will, right? But you do that for 40 years consecutively, right? And all of a sudden you're going to harvest a fruit, a reward that is significant. And so that reward started to come out in my generation, right? When all of a sudden, so work, reinvest, farming or machine shop, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, now there's true value, right? We are no longer as a whole in survival mode. Many are now in stability mode, and many are in success mode, and some are already in transference mode, where they're trying to add or transfer value beyond themselves, right? And so I think that's been the biggest impact. As far as an outside source, it's been technology. It's been the way we communicate. I mean, everyone's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. For sure. I mean, apparently Vero is out now. I don't know what Vero is, but apparently the first 100,000 people that sign up get free Vero for life.
Whatever that may be.
Whatever that may be. But I talked to a young Mennonite girl yesterday, and believe it or not, she's become a major influencer on social media. Yeah. And I mean, to think like for me that's still foreign, right? Because so I'm learning about it, but I definitely didn't grow up. Okay, so she grew up with this, right? Yeah. She doesn't know the absence of social media.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So putting that together, you know, you have the 40-year overnights. All of a sudden, it's like, well, Mennonites have always been successful. No, they haven't. But you work hard for 40 years over 3 generations, and you can't help but be successful economically. Now, going beyond that, well, I think there's a lot of things that we failed at. Right? I mean, we should have taken better care of our community and of our surrounding areas and of people outside of our community, right? And we've definitely suffered some of the consequences for being inward driven only. Yeah. I'm not saying inward driven is bad, but if that's the only thing you are, you're going to create a lot of pitfalls for yourself or for your future generations. Yeah. So the 40-year overnight success, the technology and the communication, and what we're growing up with today, just such a connected world.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Let's see. So the name of this project is Rebels, Exiles, and Bridge Builders. Which of these words, if any of those words apply, would you use to describe your cross-cultural interactions and why?
Wow. My grandpa definitely was a rebel. Mm-hmm. So he built himself a car and then he got excommunicated.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if that's exiled, but he definitely got excommunicated.
Yeah.
So he's definitely a rebel. So
yeah.
And then just the way we're working here, right? I think they all fit perfectly, especially if, like everybody is a bit of a rebel and everybody's a bit of an exilist I would definitely describe myself as a rebel, not as a troublemaker, but as someone that goes out and does things differently than what the norm is.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do you think cross-cultural interactions in the campus will look like in the future? And what are some of your hopes for the future here in the campus?
I hope that we learn to preserve our heritage somehow, right? I mean, because there is such a big move towards, okay, this whole Mennonite thing is way overrated. Let's drop it. Let's forget about it, et cetera, et cetera. I can even agree with a lot of that. I mean, I'm not your Mennonite.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
I have the right to bear arms, and that's anti-Mennonite, right? So we're all different in that sense. But we need to preserve our history and our heritage.
Yeah.
That's extremely important. And my hope is that somehow God, through the Holy Spirit, will plant that seed in young people's hearts to go back. That homing beacon that you were talking about, that will go back and say, where did we come from, and why are we, what happened, and where did we go veer off, or what happened, right? Yeah. While still learning and adapting and becoming even more creative and everything. Like I'm not saying go back and seclude yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. Yeah. But I fear that we're losing interest in who we are. We forget that it took 40 and 50 years to build what you see here. Yeah. Like we forget that, right? And one way that you see that is when you see all of these side-by-sides and motorbikes, and that are like they cost $15,000-$20,000. Like it's the price of a car, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And they're being expected by certain generation, right? Yeah. So there's no concept even of what it took, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And if you travel and you look at different countries, then you will very quickly see that hard work is definitely a part of the equation that a people's needs in order to progress. Yeah. And I just hope that we don't lose that, but I also hope that we don't accept hard work as our only thing, because if I could choose between hard work and favor with God, I choose favor every single day. Hard work's gotten me a lot of good things in life, but they never compare to what God gives me. Meaning, no matter what I did, I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it, right? Yeah. So to keep that balance and to keep that that going, I mean, yeah. I hope it happens. Absolutely. I hope some more people take interest in that. And continue to help along with those things, because that's super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in my view anyways.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation today.
Absolutely, sure. Hopefully my ranting and rambling didn't make the computer fail or something.
No.